What's up, everyone? I have a very special car review for y'all tonight. I'm reviewing the 67 Plymouth GTX. This is the second one I built. It was in remembrance of my late uncle. The first one I didn't quite get the color right, so I rebuilt it in his brand new penny copper that he had it. And here it is. Now, before we get to my uncle brother, we're gonna go over this amazing car. This is also the first car that I ever did a bare metal foil job on. The one that took me 2 days. Let's start with the engine. We'll get on my uncle brother in a minute. I have to be very careful because of this hood emblem. I've already knocked it off filming this video. I had a few choice words that I had to edit out. Y'all don't want to hear that. But this 67 really turned out amazing. Let's look at that engine work. As you can see, I put a nice frost with some green in there to emulate the reservoir tank. As you can see, I wired that beautiful engine with that Hemi 426. Nice battery in there. Very nice car. See, can we get to the interior here? Interior turned out amazing. Very happy with that. Very nice rear end. I love the tailpipes on this car. Now, my uncle didn't have these red striped tires with the rims on there. That's just something I added to it. Also, nice undercarriage. Now, the story I'm about to tell about this Plymouth GTX is one of the reasons I fell in love with Mopars. I think I explained to y'all before, I come from a Mopar family. I'm talking about my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncle, my father, all on Mopars. My father right there in the cut, chilling like he always was. In 1968, when one of my sisters was born, I wasn't even born at this time, I came along later. He bought a 1968 Plymouth Roadrunner, red with a black red top. I built that as well. I'll show y'all that later to celebrate the birth of my sister. This is my dad's little brother, uncle brother. He always, had to keep up with big bro. So he went and bought a 67 GTX. And of course, I think my dad had a Hemi in his, but the GTX just had a little more oomph on there. So it was a little faster than my dad's Roadrunner. From what I heard, it could go as well. But this is the story that makes this particular GTX so infamous. This is probably the most famous GTX during the 60s in Nashville, Tennessee. And my uncle, he's the reason it became that way. To put it mildly, they said my uncle drove this car like a bat out of hell. This is one of my favorite uncles right here. I actually wrote about him in my book, Reporter from Hell. If you read that book and I talk about a character called Uncle Baby, it's based on him, my uncle brother. Uncle brother really was a character, hilarious. You could hear him a mile down the street just from his laugh. He lived life to the fullest, enjoyed himself, was a party man, and let's be honest, he was a gangster, a man's man. My uncle, either you loved him or you got out the way, to say it mildly. Now, before we begin this story, I'm gonna tell the kids, just in case some of y'all are watching, don't try this at home. Please don't attempt this. And this goes for adults as well. As I was telling y'all, my uncle brother lived life to the fullest. And that was no exception when he drove this 67 GTX. My grandmother, who would technically that would be her son-in-law, since her real son-in-law was my dad, he was hanging out in the neighborhood. Everyone loved my grandmother's neighborhood, Neal Avenue. Now on this particular day, my uncle pulled off of Main Street onto Neal Avenue, my grandmother's street. And it's one stop sign you come to before you pretty much hit the 1/8 of a mile stretch. You dip down, what they call the dip, then you go around this curve and come back up a hill. So my grandmother said, you heard Bro Cole, that's what they called him. You heard Bro Cole hit that car. Came to the stop sign. He looked both ways, didn't see any cars, then brother hit it. My grandma said, all you hear is just tires, brother. And he come flying down the street like he always do. Going through them gears. My grandmother said when he came around that corner and hit that dip on Smiley Avenue, the car went airborne. When this car went airborne, it hit a telephone pole about right here and split the car in two. My grandmother said all you heard was a loud crash. Boom! She said the whole neighborhood ran down there. Everybody know probably Bro Cole had killed himself in his car. But when they got to the accident, you can see half of this GTX on one side, the back half on the other half of the telephone pole, and my uncle brother sitting in the car. They said my uncle brother jumped out that car, looked at the back end of it. You know what he said? I just put a full tank of gas in it. That was my uncle brother, living life to the fullest. They say he must have hit that pole doing at least 60 miles an hour when he split the car in half. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if I had an accident that bad and split a car in two, that's it. We done. We done, right? No, not my uncle brother. You know what he did? They say he took the car to the chop shop, got it welded back together, and was right back on the road driving. As a matter of fact, they said after my uncle had got the car welded back together, he took it with his wife, my late Aunt Pat, my mother, and my father was driving their Road Runner, and they drove both cars to Washington, D.C. for a family trip. But I had to tell that story about my uncle brother and his 67 GTX. A real man's man, you know. He didn't remain a gangster his whole life. He finally transitioned, and believe it or not, later on in life, he became a minister. One of my favorite uncles. I miss him to this day. I was just recently thinking about him. And this is also to show you that these cars I build mean a lot to me. They're vision cars. You know, if I'm having a challenging day and I got some things on my mind, I come over here and look at this Plymouth GTX and be like, what will Uncle Brother do? You know? I can tell you this much, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to the man of that picture, and also my dad in the corner, they don't make men like this anymore. And I try my best to uphold the values and morals they gave me and be a man's man just like them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this amazing story about my uncle brother, how he split his car in half, beautiful GTX, and loved it so much he went to the chop shop and had it welded back together and drove for many years after that. It was men like him and my father and my grandfather and my grandmother who drove Mopars that made me the Mopar man that I am today. And I'm very proud of that. God bless y'all.